Welcome to Make Me Data Literate, the podcast that makes data intelligible from the Australian Data Science Education Institute. We're on a mission to make the whole world data literate. I'm your host, Dr. Linda McIver, and every week I'll interview someone with a wild and wonderful relationship to data. Let's see what we can find out. Hello, and welcome to Make Me Data Literate. Once again, this episode is an excuse to talk to an amazingly interesting and wonderful human being. Today, I'm very excited to say that we have Dr. Owen Churches. Hello.
Hi, Linda. How you doing?
Great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. All things considered, doing well, and it's really good to see you. Thank you for having me along.
It's an absolute pleasure. So, last in my last episode with Alan Duffy, I discovered the trick of getting the interviewee to introduce themselves. So, let us know, who are you and what do you do?
That's a great trick. I like it. Well, I'm Owen, and I'm a government statistician, and my area formally is psychometrics, which is the development of measurements of psychological properties like attainment and aptitude. And at the moment, I work in the Department of Education here in South Australia.
That is so cool. Psychometrics are just fascinating to me, and such. Sometimes it seems like a really black art. I noticed when I was googling you before before this interview, that I didn't realize you have a PhD in neuroscience.
Yeah, that is what I did. I haven't actually. After that, I didn't actually do an awful lot of neuroscience. Um, but yeah, it was a really interesting time. That sort of like late 2000s, like early 2010s. Um, Neuroscientists were the people. They were just the coolest people, and I wanted to hang out. And I was really lucky. My supervisor was a fascinating and thoughtful person that I was just really lucky to spend 3 years with, thinking about the brain and how we could use the masses of data that come in from brain imaging machines to help answer really like useful and important questions about human development.
So that's where the stats came in, was it? Analyzing the imaging?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So I studied originally psychology, and because psychology works so hard to be taken seriously as a science, there's always like a lot of stats in psychology, and um, I was just super fortunate to, um, I guess, have like done quite a bit of maths in school, and just happened to have an aptitude for that sort of thing, and an interest in it, such as that I didn't actually realize that part of a psychology degree would actually be quite off-putting to a lot of my colleagues. Um, and it was pretty clear to me, even by partway through first year of psychology, that um, that this was actually this part of using maths to help understand people was maybe what I really wanted to do, rather than work clinically. Um, so I was really lucky to discover that super early on, and just to be able to keep falling into positions where I could do that.
So you're not a big believer in the 5-year plan?
Yeah, I mean,
Chase the doors as they open?
yeah, I mean, I'm a, I do tend to like make plans. um, they rarely sort of turn out exactly. Yeah, I don't think they've ever really turned out for me the way I'd planned. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing. Yeah, you're right. I did. It was definitely during my PhD that I learnt to really do stats. I was really lucky in that program. although it was just a research program, there was an opportunity to do a lot of coursework, and I was really lucky to be able to go to and attend and work through a lot of really serious stats courses that gave me enough skills that I can um, do jobs like this. I mean, I work now with colleagues who have like actual PhDs in statistics, and I'm super lucky now to be able just to learn off them. So I'm it's one of those things where I'm definitely I wouldn't have planned 5 or 10 or 15 years ago to have been here now, but I'm quite happy with. I mean, I'm incredibly happy with how it's worked out. It seems just like a lot of good fortune.
That's I can relate to that. I think the universe laughs at 5 year plans.
Yeah, yeah.
um, so we've kind of touched on it a little bit on the next question. What did you have to learn in order to do what you do, in order to be a statistician? What was there something missing from your formal education that you had to kind of go out and find, or was it all just kind of natural following train track stuff?
Um, that's a really good question. In a sense, they feel like almost sort of like not like non-overlapping sets. Like, what did I have to learn to get my job, and what was missing from it? Like in a sense, I don't want to be too like cynical about what I had to learn to get my job, but in a fair like government data science statistics is still in a growth in a very accelerated growth phase of hiring, which means that to some extent what I had to do to get this job was get degrees,
Right.
right? Um, there really should come a time soon where people applying for jobs like mine go through some sort of like competency. There should be some like objective like measure of proficiency and skill level, but at the moment it's still sort of credentialized, and I think that means that well, I'm super privileged then in that situation because I just happened to have like been the sort of um, middle class kid who could like be packed off for university like in England, right? Um, so that's what I had to learn to get this job. What I didn't learn, what I've had to learn on the job, is yeah, so many things. But I think something that I still struggle a lot with is that in formal education, um, uh, objectives are like stable and clearly defined. They're what Robin Hogarth calls kind learning environments. You have this really consistent, like well-known, documented goal, and you work systematically toward it. Um, I've worked in pharmaceutical industry and in a health and in education in government, and in all those cases, objectives are really not like that. Um, they like things ebb and flow. You like senior people sort of come by and say, "Hey, there's this thing," and you need to know as a statistician in this sort of environment not just how to do the thing, but how to know like there's a sort of it's not just sort of interpersonal like um, understanding of other minds, but sort of cultural understanding of what at this time and place it would mean for someone in that position to ask someone in my position to do something, like, do they really want it? Do they really want it? Like, and like, what does now mean? Does it now literally mean like if it's not done in 1 minute, there's no point in doing it? Or does it mean, like, this year? Like, so there's a whole lot of understanding, yeah, that, and knowing that when you do it and then you give it to the person, they are often like, oh, what's this? And you're like, it's that thing you asked for. And they're like, oh, because in their mind, like, they have moved on. And that's all radically different to, like, everything that happens in formal education, where, you hand in your assignment and the lecturer goes, I mean, they may say it's a bad assignment, but at least they're expecting you to give it to them.
Yeah, you have a
So
due
that's
date
sort
and
of,
you have requirements.
yeah, right. So knowing that, and actually, and even knowing that we, as the sort of statistician, like, influence that dynamic environment that is like, and the people who do my job well are the ones who take, like, a super active role in shaping the requirements of their own role to be the thing that they want to do. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's clever. I've just been sitting here waiting to be told
Yeah.
what to do. So yeah, there's a whole lot of, it's not just like communication skills and, like, understanding other minds. It's these sorts of, like, cultural nuances and expectations. I'd say that's, like, the number one thing I've had to learn. The second thing I've had to learn is that, in big organizations, and that's, I mean, government obviously is a big organization, but also, like, a lot of industry is. In my in my limited experience, sort of super crystallized concrete knowledge, like, about in-house processes, is actually super important, like, radically important. Like, there's this whole sort of meme about, I I feel, um, in the world, that, like, what matters now is transferable skills and, like, super abstract reasoning. And in a sense, like, that's all I trained, like, for, is like,
Yep.
abstract out, abstract out, abstract out. That's, like, what modernist, like, education does, is to think in the most, like, non-concrete terms. But actually, the way to get ahead in big organizations is to be the person who knows, like, the thing, like, the name of the field in the one database that has the one thing that someone one day is going to need.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's a real challenge for me. Like, it doesn't come, like, I spent a long time learning, like, super abstract ways of thinking, and realizing that I'm going to have to learn, like, to get ahead, I have to stay in this one place and learn this gargantuan amount of, it's not even just, like, learn the concrete specifics of, like, child educational assessment. It's about learning the, like, processes of my particular agency's database naming structure. And I'm like, wow, that's not, like, what I'm feel like I'm naturally good at, and it's certainly not what I was, like, like, what I've been sort of sold as that the world needs.
It's
But
not
it's
what you were
definitely
trained
what
for.
is organizationally, desired. Yeah.
It's a little like the difference, isn't it, between using a textbook perfect data set that comes out with a, magic normal curve, and using a real data set that has outliers everywhere and is actually kind of messy and complicated and doesn't really answer the question that you need it to. Like, that's the real world. Why was I taught the
Absolutely.
textbook data set? Like, that has helped me not at all.
Yes, that is so true. Yeah, sometimes I imagine myself looking at a textbook, distribution, and then I look at my own work, and then I sort of look back at this imaginary textbook, and I go, "Whoa, yeah, yeah." So they're great. It's a great question. What I had to learn, what I've had to learn. I think the other thing I'd probably just say is there's an awful lot that I like don't know that I don't know. Like I'm sort
Yeah.
of blundering around an awful lot still, um, and yeah, the size of the things that I don't know is probably quite big, and to some extent that's a bit exciting because I hope to keep doing this for like decades and decades. Um, so yeah, here's to the things that I didn't just already learn as a student. I wouldn't want to be in the situation where I'm just applying those same skills
It's
forever.
so interesting because neither of the things, like the big things that you said you weren't taught that you needed to know, none of it was technical stuff. And if you look at data science courses, they're heavy on the technical stuff. In fact, half the time it's all they have. It's like, oh, we will teach you R, and we will teach you k-means clustering, and we will teach you, machine learning, but we're not going to teach you the complexities of actually working with the data and real people and what it's like in the workplace and all that stuff that you actually need in order to make a go of it. So, what do you wish everyone knew about data? If you had one thing you were like, if just everybody had this idea in their heads, we'd be okay.
um, oh, what, the one bit of data knowledge to rule them all.
Yeah,
Um,
the one ring of data science.
I would. Okay, so if I narrowed it down to my field of government data, I would say this. I would say that all government data is the result of definitions, uh, by which I mean um, there isn't like a, when we say these are the number of students at this school, this isn't a natural self-evident process by which we count. Like, and this is a crazy confronting thought process to like everyone, like including like people like who maybe should know better. But there's this there's this sort of process that David Spiegelhalter and Michael Blastland in the UK talk about a lot. I think they use they say that the sort of the way we learnt to count, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is great for doing maths, but like really bad for doing um, like counting of real things in the world, because most real things, and especially people, aren't mutable. They one person here doesn't equal the same as one person over there. Um, I used to do this little sort of game. The CSIRO had this mathematicians in schools program, and I was really lucky to work with this really cool year 6, 7 teacher um, at Parkside Primary, and we came up with this sort of gimmick where we'd say to her class, "So how many students are there in this class?" And they would say, "Oh." Like they would all write down a number, and you could see most of the kids would like look around and like count. But then we'd say, "Hey, so you've got a number. Like, say you've counted the number of people here. Did you remember Fred? Like, Fred's sick today, but is he in this class?" And they'd go like, "Oh yeah, okay." And then they go, well, what about Jane? Like she left this school like last term, but she was in this class this year. So is she in this class? And they go, yeah, probably. And you can just keep going on and on and on. And the real punchline and then I'd say, I'm like doing a course at the moment, like in uh, database architecture. Um, and I'm like here in your classroom. So um, I'm a student and I'm here in your classroom. I'm like, am I a student in your class? And the kids would just go, and like by that point, like they're throwing the tables over.
Yeah,
They've had it, and I think that's the the fact that all these numbers are the result of a human process. Like it's like um, yeah, someone, some human has come up with this definition, um, and then they've applied it. Um, it's like Ellen Broad calls it. It's made by humans, like,
yeah.
and that's the first thing that's made by humans is the definition of what the thing is. And
I love that.
I think what gets really pernicious about it is that it once it's been defined, like by the like especially when it's defined by the state, it then
Mm,
becomes the thing. Like it's not like it then feeds back onto the
yeah,
system itself. And I
and
think
it
that's
shapes the system.
yeah, absolutely. It's not just um, like a mirror of the system anymore. Like even like it's not even just a mirror of a fragment of the system, like that was like reflecting just that part that the state had um, decided it wanted to measure. It then forces the rest of the system to behave the way the state wanted to measure it.
Yeah,
And the fact that statisticians and government data in general aren't just like a passive aggregator, but are like having these active processes because they've defined things in particular ways that then the rest of the system like needs to acquiesce and needs to uh, fall into line to in order to be the way the state wants it to self to be measured. Yeah, it's a really pernicious problem, and I don't have a sort of nicely wrapped up way of thinking about it, and maybe that then to draw a line under my rambling is the thing that I would most like people to know about data is that um, the it's worthy of spending time thinking about the problems and struggling with them a little bit. That think that the closer you are to the data, the less clear things should be.
I love that. That's beautiful. I think I need to put that on my wall somewhere. I was talking to someone involved in NAPLAN recently, and I I get what you say about uh, the definitions and everything, and in theory I knew that, but she said to me, "Well, okay, let's talk about how many kids sat NAPLAN." I'm like, "Well, that's straightforward. That's easy. How many kids did NAPLAN?" She's like, "Okay, well, there's 3 tests. So do you have to do all 3 tests to have sat NAPLAN?" I'm like, "Oh, well, that's a curveball." And she's like, "What about the kid who sat down, signed into the system, or put their name on the paper and didn't do anything else? Did they sit NAPLAN?" And it's like, oh, oh, like here is this number that I thought was simple and straightforward, and that is such a trap that we think that numbers are somehow clean and objective when actually that even things like how many kids are there in a class or how many kids at NAPLAN, they're not They're not simple answers. And if we think they're simple answers, that's probably the biggest red flag that we should be like, well, hang on, we haven't detected the complexity because it's got to be there.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's like, um, that is such a good idea. We could like totally train ourselves to like think, hang on a minute, this sounds too easy. It's a red flag.
I love that. That like we should build that into the curriculum and start putting that into all my projects.
Yeah.
Are you good? Do you know how all this works? Okay, we have a problem.
No, I love that. Yeah.
um, what are some of the worst data mistakes you've ever seen?
um, oh, uh, so I mean, I'm tempted to go sort of to think of worst as like scale, like where the
Yep.
consequences, like where it was like really big and public. And
Mm-hmm.
my reason for doing that is that none of the mistakes I've made have ever like made it out to the world. someone
That's
someone
a happy
smarter than
place
me
to
has
be.
always caught them. But I think maybe the single biggest data mistake of recent times, certainly the thing that springs to my mind was coming on 2 years ago, um, when it was suddenly noticed in the UK that the number of COVID cases hadn't gone up for like 2 days. Um, and journalists started making inquiries, and it turns out that the like central United Kingdom health systems COVID surveillance was run off a single Excel web sheet. Uh,
Oh,
yeah,
oh.
um, and it had literally just run out of rows, um, and no one had noticed. Um,
Oh
yeah,
boy.
and um, and in fact, like there's a lot like has since been written about this. Like, and total credit to I've forgotten the name of the agency, so it wasn't actually the NHS itself. It was some sort of like it's where things often go wrong in government is when things get taken on by a sort of slightly abstracted out like sub agency, and I think it was something closer to Premier and Cabinet that had taken this on. And
Hmm.
I think the sort of the punch, like first of all, Excel is not a database, like,
Yep.
um, and so, but the sort of the real punchline to it all, and like, Bill Gates actually even got involved at some point, and like I think he like tweeted or something, and he was like, "This is a tragedy," but he's like, first of all, like my company has products we could have given you to use. Um, and second of all, the number that they hit is actually the number that's hit by like old, like pre, like 2000, like Excel, like XLSX format actually has even, and he was like, what's remarkable is that they still had installed this like he was like, not only were you using the wrong product, but you were using the wrong product from the wrong decade. um, and like,
Oh,
and we can all sort of laugh about it a bit now, but actually we can't, like, because um, that actually had like real world repercussions, and a couple of health economists in the UK have actually modeled the number of deaths that probably resulted from that inaccurate information just for those few days. Um, that the amount of surveillance that was then being done wasn't increased quickly, and
hmm.
people lost their lives, and that's horrific. So I think that form of data mistake is the one that sort of maybe I'm most watchful. There's the sort of the small scale sort of almost gotcha moment where like someone says like the wrong number because they've looked at the like mean instead of like the median. Like those things are like bad, but those sort of like it's the data. I guess as I've gotten along more and more in government, I realized that the real work, in a sense, is in the architecture. It's building us like
Mm.
all public policy problems are actually data architecture problems now, and we need to like radically invest not just in like the data scientists to do the cool charts and whatnot, but we
Yeah.
need like really like we need an engineering like that's on a scale that we used to think about like building railways, um, and we need those people like on hand like at all times, maybe wearing hard hats. I'm down, I'm down with that. Like
In case the data explodes.
yeah. um,
Yeah, I think that's a really crucial insight, and one that's surprisingly difficult, it seems, to sort of persuade policymakers of. They're like, well, data, you just put it in a file, or you
yeah.
put it in it just is, and there's um no awareness of the complexity of managing the data in a consistent, searchable, sustainable, you know, functional way, so that you can not just get out the data that you're looking for today, but 3 weeks later, when someone needs some kind of different analysis, you can do that because you've planned and you've got the systems in place. I worked with some scientists a few years ago, and I was looking at finding data that they from their work to build projects around, and these guys were doing solar technologies. They're building new forms of solar panels and trying out new materials and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, well, what we could do is we could take the test you did on that set of solar panels and the test you did on this set of solar panels and look at the differences. They're like, oh, we can't do that because we didn't use the same uh, structure, and we didn't calibrate them, and actually we didn't save the data from that experiment. And I was just like, oh, where is the scientific method as applied to your data? Where's the how is it that we have scientists doing this really important work and really valuable work that they cannot evaluate? Because like, did we make progress from the last experiment to this one? No, because the conditions weren't the same, so we can't really compare them. Like, this isn't even science. How is what? But that's the way, like, data is just flung about with wild abandon, and no very little planning and very little forethought, and that's not going to lead us to an evidence-based,
mm,
enlightened future.
no, so true. It's yeah, wow, yeah. It's not, is it? I think like maybe a bit related to this then is the pro like maybe this ties like a couple of your questions together because now I think about it, another thing that I've had to learn since finishing formal education is that no one cares about you showing you're working. Um, right, so like
Yep.
all maths like from I don't know like junior high school like through to the end of university is always like, and I actually looking back I'm like really nostalgic about it, like teachers go out of their way to say, look, the actual number you like or like non-number you get at the end is kind of neither here nor there. Like there will
Yep.
be some marks assigned to it, but we are marking you on the steps you take.
Mm.
You have to have a correct process, and if you happen to chance on the right outcome through an incorrect process, then you don't get full marks.
Yep.
Likewise, if you get to the wrong outcome, but through a process that by and large was like really good, then you'll still get like really good marks. Um, and that's something that is in no way like industry, government, that's not preferenced um, at all. Like decision makers, by and large, aren't interested in delving into the process. Um,
Not only
and
that, but there's no one looking over your shoulder to make sure it's okay.
yeah,
So if all they
yeah,
get is the outcome and they have no idea of the process,
that's bad. So
however
we
good
have
you are, you're going to make mistakes occasionally.
totally, because we're human. So my
Mm.
team and I have this really good process um, of checking each other's code. Um, and like, so I'm really confident like about our work. Like my mistakes are picked up. I pick up other people's mistakes. But I sort of then I want to share the code, like with decision makers and with the world, like because
Yeah.
by that point like it's beautiful and like elegant, like and it's at the point like I've like because of this process of proofreading code by a peer, um, like sometimes my work isn't just like made like more accurate. Sometimes it's like just performance. Like I have like some colleagues who are just like way better computer scientists than me, and they'll literally just like rewrite things. They'll just be like, "Yeah, look, I mean, what you've done gets there," but like, I can shave like minutes off the compute time. Watch this, and I'm like, wow. Um, so yeah, it's a it's a funny thing, isn't it? I don't know, like the solar panels. That's a sad tale, isn't it? And it's probably a really
Yeah,
cool
but
tale
it's
too.
that's what I was about to say. Yeah, those are that's the one that was on the top of my head. But I could list many similar conversations. It's just, and part of that is we're not taught as scientists to wrangle data.
Mm,
A science degree at most institutions does not include a data unit at all unless you actively go out of your way and try to shovel one into an elective slot or something. That, like, you can get through an entire science degree without ever having a conversation about uh, the necessities of data science and data management. And even if you go off and hire a data scientist to do the data parts, you still need some kind of understanding, and we're not teaching it. Which is why I exist. But
that's right.
um,
Therein lies the market proposition
right, exactly. this is
for
my
Dr. Linda
this is my
McGarner.
this is my business case.
Yeah.
Moving on. Have you
No,
ever
for
seen
sure.
have you ever seen data deliberately misused? Like, we've talked about some examples of really horrifying errors, but uh, what about the cases where it's actually manipulative?
Yeah, that's a um, that's a gray area, isn't it? Because it makes me think, like, most of the time, like most of the examples that spring to mind aren't um, like complete falsehoods.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
that's how they're effective, isn't it? That's,
yeah,
the grain of truth
yes, exactly,
is what makes it work.
right. So there is a branch of data, I guess, yeah, sort of numeric kind of jigamy pokemy that crops up every now and then. And um, here in the election campaign in Australia, there's been an example of pretty recently. So interest rates went up this week, like the Reserve Bank's
Mm.
interest rates, and um, the Prime Minister said, "Look, um, to some extent, we've all known this was going to happen, and I know Australians are prepared for this, because in the last month there's been a doubling of the number of households that have moved off of variable and onto fixed rate mortgages. And the problem with saying that, the problem with saying doubling, is that in, I suspect, the minds of a lot of listeners, all of a sudden people think, well, most people are on are now, like, it's going to be fine. Most people are on, like, it's doubled. Like, most people, I
That's a
guess, are
lot.
on
It's got to
fixed
be a
rate.
lot.
Yeah, right. The problem is that the proportion of people who were in the first place on fixed rate mortgages was vanishingly small, because variable rates were like bizarrely low, like,
Yeah.
and they have been for like over a decade. So yeah, it's doubled, but it's not gone, like, it's not, it was such a small number to begin with that even when it doubled, it's still a small number. um and I
It's like
think that,
risk, isn't it?
yes, so that area of um misleading uh data use, where um things are talked about as multiples, like, instead of talking about, like, as proportions, like, or just
Mm.
as counts,
Mm.
like, they're a bad class of data misleading statements. There's this whole, like, area of Carl Bergstrom's Calling Bullshit sort of,
I
um,
love that book.
yeah, right, that talks about this, and um, I think I'm now, like, super, like, height, like, I have, like, this super heightened, like, um, reflex to them, but yeah, they're a problem.
I think that that super heightened reflex is important, and it's one of the things I've noticed when I start teaching something, and I'm looking for examples. You suddenly see them everywhere. So I used to teach critical thinking to first year computer scientists back when I was an academic, and I would find these examples everywhere. Of funnily, the one that sticks in my mind in particular was data focused. It was universities receive more funding now than ever before. And I used to go through with my students, how can that be true? And also completely misleading and, deceptive. And once you start looking for those things, it's like once you start looking for the zero on the scale of the graph, you can't help but apply, but look at everything through that lens. My students used to say that I had broken them because like every time they saw a graph, they started picking it apart. They go, stop. But it's a it's a really important skill. What is the first question you ask if you see some data in the media, whether it's a graph or a stat? What do you how do we inoculate ourselves against that kind of stuff?
um, I'm tempted to answer by defaulting not to my sort of um, statistical sort of questions, but to pivot back to, like, being um, a psychologist. And the first question one always asks is motive. like, like,
Yeah.
literally, like someone is behaving in this particular way, presenting something to me, to others. There is some intentionality behind it. What does that person desire? What is their the outcome they are hoping for? And that help by understanding that motive, one then can sort of weight all the information. That doesn't mean, like, it's not to be, like, super cynical and be like everyone's just, like, dodgy. It's to say, like, everyone has um, hopes and dreams and like things that for them might be real that for you might not be. So um, uh, I've been recently to see a lot of medical professionals with my dad. He's had some health problems, and I've started to think that like if a general practitioner um, or uh, a geriatrician says to you, no, you probably don't need surgery. That's like one thing. But if a surgeon says to you, no, you don't need surgery, like that is like I weight that way higher because like
Yep.
I feel like the surgeons probably come in with a default of wanting to like slice you open.
Yep.
um, and so if they're pushing like back against their own default, then I take that like very seriously. Um, so yeah, I think understanding the motives why someone is presenting that information to you is is super useful.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Do you think the pandemic has changed the sort of societal understanding of data? Do you think it's shifted the literacy level at all?
Um, I think the only honest answer I could actually give is I don't have any data to answer that question.
Excellent. Well done. It was a trap and you
Yeah,
didn't fall into it.
um, look, I would
That's the
love.
problem, isn't it? How do we
Yeah,
assess it? How do we?
I I think I think that I'm not. Look, for a little while, I might have even been hopeful that for a little while there was a more widespread um, interest in and trust in quantitative experts.
Mm.
Like that is to say, even if the population of places like Australia were not necessarily interested in gaining like hard epidemiology skills, they were nonetheless
Hmm.
interested in and respectful of and like even just frankly aware that there were people called epidemiologists. Um,
Yep.
Nowadays, like I have some. I think by like that may have been a true effect for a while, but there's been probably some regression to the long term
Mm.
mean that
Mm.
in most of the time, like for most of like modern history, no one has really cared about the people counting things, and I think we're probably on our way back there. Um,
Yeah, that's my impression too. So we don't end on a downer. What excites you about data?
um, oh, so much. I mean, I'm just like so incredibly lucky that that core part of my job is literally something that is intrinsically motivating to me. Like literally, like understand, like coming up with that journey of coming up with code to understand numbers that help me understand people is just like every step is really delightful. It's like just a really wonderful thing I get to do. Um, I do genuinely, and like, this is such a cliche of like data person working in government, but I really do believe that there is a something good that can come out of like even with all the caveats I had at the beginning about how like governments, like the state, will define things in a certain way that then like shapes the thing that they were defining, and that's a problem. Even with that stated, I think the power for good that can come through marshalling the aggregated power of government, when adequately informed, we can do great things. Like we can like lift literacy rates, we can
Mm.
eradicate smallpox, and we can do all these things because we've counted things accurately, and then made that information meaningful to key decision makers for action. Um, and that's what I want to keep doing. Like this is a real thing that we can actually do. Like um, we really can like make sure schools that, I mean, sure, with the headline that all schools need more funding, we can make
Yeah.
sure that that schools that are in particular need of particular resources get them like
Mm.
in a timely manner.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's a really like useful thing that I can do in the world. Um, and so that's what excites me.
That's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you so much. That was such a great conversation. We could honestly stay all day, and I might have to get you back on to go deeper into some of those things.
Well, I have had so much fun. It's honestly, it's great as always to chat with you, Linda. I feel like I'm sad that we didn't get to talk as much during the pandemic, but I feel like we had a really nice conversation when I read your excellent book, Raising Heretics. That was like a lovely like chat with a coffee with Linda, and I really enjoyed it, and it really got me thinking, I guess, a lot about what it means to um, what it means to not just to teach in that sort of in a sort of strict sense, but what it means to um, open people to the idea of um, quantitative thinking, um, and I'm really really grateful for that conversation that I guess you weren't really there for, but I definitely had with you by reading your book. So thank you very much for sharing that with the world.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Owen. Hopefully, we'll talk soon.
I really look forward to it. Thanks, Linda.
Thanks for listening to Make Me Data Literate. You can support the work of the Australian Data Science Education Institute at givenow.com.au/ADSEI. Tune in next time for more conversations with amazing data experts.